Brigitte Barclay is one of the UK's most high-profile UFO witnesses and abductees. She has worked with many of the world's leading researchers of the alien abduction phenomena, including Budd Hopkins, Dolores Cannon, and the late John Mack. She has also collaborated extensively with former Minister of Defence official Mack. I think you all know who this is. Who has described her case as one of the most interesting and compelling that he has come across. Brigitte Barclay has lived and worked in both the UK and the US, and her story has been featured in national daily newspapers, including The Sun, the Daily Mail, and as well as a variety of UFO magazines. She is currently working on a book and on a number of films and TV projects. There's one thing else I'd like to add, ladies and gentlemen. The energy in this room since this morning from Gerard and Richard and so forth has built up, and there's been a lovely, in my case, and the thing I call the spiritual energy that's built up in this room has been really new. And the love and the warmth in this room and the companionship is really built up as well. And I'd like you to extend this towards Brigitte, because this is only the second time that Brigitte has spoken in public. So please, she's very nervous. She's very lovely, she's very beautiful, and please give a big hand for Brigitte Barclay.
I wanted to know you were never there. I didn't understand what he meant, because I said, yes, I was. He said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. He said, can you get this through your head? You never saw anything. You were not there. You don't know anything. And he said, it's a big effort out here. You just think about it, you want this together, and then you will ever find it. He said, remember the bones and nobody will ever know. And I told him I wouldn't talk about it.
Can I ask, can I have the lights dim? I don't want to see any of you. Sorry, I didn't know.
It's nothing personal.
No.
Nick, could you maybe dim the lights down a bit for us, please? As long as we can't see you, we're doing fine.
Not right now, no IT expert, obviously.
He said, no, you weren't. I said, yes.
So one's up here, I think.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for the lights to have to come down a little bit, I just want to, as usual, thank the organisers for the splendid job that they've done here, and thank you, Richard, again for the introduction. Really, I'm going to take, I hope, a fairly minimal role here. It's great. I always like a situation where I don't have to do much work, because this really isn't about me, it's about Brigitte, and I'm really here as a facilitator. But as Richard said in his introduction, really this is, despite the high-profile figures in the abduction research community that Brigitte has worked with, and despite some high-profile newspaper and magazine features, and more to come on that, really, this is only the second public appearance, and the first, I mean, by an interesting piece of, I think, both poignancy and synchronicity. Her previous first appearance was 10 years ago in Leeds, pretty much right here at the late Graham Birdsall's UFO conference. And Graham, of course, is someone who was greatly loved by all of us, I'm sure, and is hugely missed for the massive contribution that he made to this field. So, 10 years after that appearance, we're back. The A team is back, or is it the B team? So, really, I think that's about enough from me. Aside from saying, I suppose, a little bit of how I really first met Brigitte and why I became involved in her story. As you'll find out, she's quite feisty and tenacious, despite the protestations of being quite shy and nervous. And she was involved in a local witness support group and an unfavourable newspaper article had appeared about the subject. And instead of doing what I suspect most people would do, i.e. scowl and say, oh, for goodness sake, the media making us sound like idiots, Brigitte decided, you know what, I'm not going to have that. I'm going to get in touch with this guy I've heard about, Nick Pope, who used to do this from the ministry. I'm going to get back in touch with the reporter, and I'm going to say, no, this isn't a silly season story. This is a serious story. People do see these things. They do experience these things. And I want to set the record straight. And that's exactly what she did. So, you know, don't think that you can't take, perhaps, direct action. The theme of the first day here was UFOs and the media. There are ways, if something doesn't go right, or perhaps having a go and fixing it and putting it right. So I think with that out of the way, just to give you a sense that often people have one-off experiences and encounters and things. There are some stats out there. Brigitte, if you'd just like to run us through the fact that it's not just one thing that you've seen or experienced.
No. Hello, everyone. No, I don't know why I have so many sightings, and a lot of my sightings are always in broad daylight. As you can see, I usually get them very close. The closest ever I've had a craft at 45 foot to 50 foot length was about 5 metres away from me. And as you'll hear later, you know, there's a lot of involvement in that one. I don't actually class any of my nighttime sightings. I class them as broad daylight structures above me. I've seen various forms of structures, whether they be like the typical Billy Mere structure, or the very famous case in Scotland with the the balls, nautical balls, with sea mines, they're called, and I've seen those going over another abductee's house. I didn't know she was an abductee at the time, and I met her. When I did meet her, I said, well, I saw structured balls going over towards your house. So I get them in various shapes and sizes. I've seen black triangles, I've seen military intercepting them. I don't know why. You know, I'm blessed that I have, and I know lots of people out there really do want to see, but you know, I love seeing them, so yeah.
Well, every story has a beginning, and in Brigitte's case, there is something, I think, quite extraordinary that has implications that go far wider than her own story. Many of you are, of course, almost everyone is familiar with the traditional blood grouping system, the ABO grouping. I mean, we've all got our blood groups. But aside from the ABO grouping, the most clinically significant categorization is the whole rhesus blood grouping. Now, in terms of that, you either have the rhesus antibody, or you have the rhesus factor, or you don't. And you are either therefore rhesus positive or rhesus negative. And something very interesting that some of you will be aware of, but we'll come on to that in a minute, and I just want to really perhaps ask Brigitte, how is this personal to you?
Well, I didn't realise it was very personal until I started contacting people within the abduction field, and a lot of the times they asked, was I rhesus negative? And I said, well, it's actually a bit deeper than that. I was one of the first out of 5 test babies for the anti-D injection, that if you're a mother, the more children you have, the more chance they have of being rhesus negative. So my now godfather, well, he was my godfather at the time, was the founder of the anti-D injection. And it goes back to, Nick says, and quite a few people, that I was the start of helping other people and births if you're rhesus negative. And so now the statistics is quite high for me and the other people. There was 5 of us involved in the tests. to keep people alive, babies alive, because of the anti-D injection. It's world-breaking and life-saving.
Just to put that, just to put some flesh on the bones, this work in which Brigitte's godfather was involved, and of course in which Brigitte was personally one of the subjects. The anti-D injection is reliably estimated to save about 10,000 infant deaths, to prevent 10,000 infant deaths each year. And that's just in the United States. So extrapolating those figures, this work has saved around about 250,000 lives each year. And of course, quite apart from the fact that Brigitte was very much a test subject for that, and I think we came up with patient zero just as we were putting this presentation together. Why, of course, this is particularly significant, as Brigitte mentioned, she's often asked if she's rhesus negative, and one sees running through a huge amount of the UFO abduction and close encounter literature, certainly the suggestion that a significantly high proportion of people who have these abduction and encounter experiences are rhesus negative, and a much higher proportion than the general population. So is there something about being rhesus negative that is significant in the whole abduction phenomenon? Is it a reason for it? Is it a symptom of it? And is the fact that Brigitte has been almost at the heart of this, is that significant?
Well, I will say that I'm no longer rhesus negative. I was born at 5 months. I was in an incubator, continuing from then onwards, still having tests done on me. And I had blood transfusion, so I am no longer rhesus negative. But obviously the start of it, with me being the test subject, that's obviously a major deal to them. So, and that's why I think maybe that my experiences have continued.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Sorry getting back so short, but I'm just quite shy.
Well, I think something that you often find, both with UFO witnesses and abductees, is that, and we touched on this at the beginning, again, the point that things are seldom a one-off. And I think particularly when you look at the alien abduction, alien encounter phenomenon, one finds that rather than being a one-off, you're dealing with a series of events that occur throughout the life, that begin in childhood and are ongoing. And I've seen this. I mean, of course, I just very briefly, although I investigated UFOs for the Ministry of Defence, obviously one cannot, it's impossible to run a UFO project without finding yourself receiving alien abduction cases as well. So that's I suppose how I was first drawn into this. But the idea that these things perhaps start in childhood and progress throughout the life, and also, as actually we saw in Kim Carlsberg's presentation when she showed the clip from Intruders, which is based on Budd Hopkins' book of the same name. Not only is it a running group of encounters in someone's lifetime, it's actually something that seems to affect different family members. So with that in mind, I really want to ask you to tell one of the childhood stories that again, when we give these things a name, we call the Chinese girl and the gazebo story.
Okay. I must have been about 6, 7. I lived in a little village in Devon when it was safe. You could roam around the village and everyone knew where everyone was, and you could walk the dog, not come back for hours, and everything, everyone knew that you were fine. Well, one day I did that. I took my dog for a walk down by the beach, and I decided to go home a different way. Now, I don't know why I decided to go home a different way, because it was not something I would usually do. It'd be down the road, home, and then, my meal on the table. But this time I went a totally different path. And I was walking down a road, went up to a cul-de-sac, and found myself a little bit lost. But there in front of me is what I call a Chinese girl. Now, obviously, when you're younger, you know, you've got the TV, you've got Sesame Street, so you can know the variation of different people and things, and I knew that there was something very different about her. And it was, apart from her eyes, it was just her. There was, you know, it's just, she didn't say anything to me, but she just showed me some money. And it was like a communication. I don't remember recalling speaking to her verbally. I remember being there for a very short space of time and then being aware that I had to go home. But before she went, she pointed to where her house was. So being children, want to play together again the next day, she showed me her house and off I trotted off home and thought nothing of it. The next day I went to go and find her house. And it was about the same time of night, well, tea time-ish, and I went up to the cul-de-sac and her house wasn't there. There were other houses there to the right of the cul-de-sac, but where her house was, where she showed me her house was a field. And in that field is what I can describe like the typical, you know, Gulf breeze craft, was what I call the gazebo. It was a structured craft with lanterns. It looked like coloured lights around it. Off the ground, the grass was shimmering all underneath. And I just, you know, was captivated by it. Why I sort of have always, you know, I do laugh as well at this, why I call it gazebo, because at that time, you know, you had all of like the Elvis Presley films on, and there was one out in Hawaii, and I just must have picked it from there. That looked kind of similar, the structure with lights all the way around it at night. So I used to have lots of paranormal experiences. I used to see ghosts and various things. But that one incident, I could never put into a ghost incident. I used to see, you know, ghosts as clear as all of you, but that one I sort of kept on the back burner because I just knew that it wasn't right. And that was what I would say was my first UFO experience. I forgot something. Also, a couple of days prior to going to work with Budd Hopkins, I relived that experience in my mind again. I never went back to the location, but I relived the experience trying to sort of think of things that I could ask Budd and things. And I just remembered jumping down from somewhere because I thought, how the hell did I get home? I never remembered getting home. And I just remember having my hands gripping around the table and jumping down from something, and then I'm at home. And so that's why I couldn't fit it into the typical ghost sort of scenario. It was just a very different experience.
I think many of you will be familiar with the concept of screen memory in abduction experiences. And I think many people are familiar, for example, with the number of abductees who that have perhaps a conscious recollection of having had some strange, unfathomable experience, and somewhere in this experience was, for example, an owl with huge black eyes was captivating you, and then sometimes consciously, sometimes under regression hypnosis, when the veil falls away, it's like, oh no, it wasn't an owl. And I think when I first heard about Brigitte's experiences, and when she told me this as a conscious memory, and later, of course, with Budd Hopkins, we delved a little deeper. You know, my first thought was, oh, hello.
I wouldn't have to put it back.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. My first thought was that this is a fascinating almost example of perhaps screen memory, and almost the charming way in which a young child would take something, an anomalous experience, and really come up with almost the only thing that you know, from your imagination or from the television that you've watched, and so you get this somewhat surreal experience of meeting a Chinese girl who gives you a piece of money to look at with strange symbols on, shows you her house in the middle of the field, which is a nice round house with lots of lights on it, which is you know, just a couple of feet above the ground, as houses are, of course. You know. and you know, again, I think it's a marvellous example. It's one of the most narratively rich examples of this that I've come across, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I think really now another childhood experience, the man at the bottom of the garden. Again, this is something that, can you tell us?
Okay. The man at the bottom of the garden, I must have seen about 4 or 5 times that I recall consciously. He would, well, this is actually, oh God, I don't know how I can use this thing. Okay, where is it?
It's the bottom one.
Yeah. Oh. Sorry, idiot.
We got that technology from Roswell, by the way.
Okay.
Can you quote it on?
This is my old house here. This is all of my garden. Daisy, I lost it. Okay, and that is next door. Now, here is my kitchen window, and here is the barn at the bottom of the garden, and just to the left, your left, used to be a well, an old pump well. And I used to see him always by the pump well, and I would always be in the kitchen. Now, I always knew that he was there. I always had a sense that I had to go to the kitchen window and he would be there right in front of me. Now, obviously, it's quite a short distance, and it was like telepathy. I knew that he'd be there. I'd go to the kitchen window, and I used to shout to anyone, who was in the house. Mum, was usually in the kitchen cooking, or brothers upstairs. He's back. He's here, and he was dressed all in black, and kind of like what you get, like the old fisherman's suits, like the old rubber suits, top to toe. I don't visually remember his face. I just remember how large he was, and just the power that he gave off. The fact that he drew me always to that window in the kitchen, and to the point of other people who had witnessed him. My brother and my cousin, and at this point they were in the house, and I shouted, he's back. And my brother and cousin legged it downstairs, legged it out of the back door, and legged it down. Now, they didn't catch him, because what he used to do, from here to there, he used to glide. He used to, as weird as it is, he used to glide by looking at me really straight, and go to into the barn. And that was another experience that I could never put down as a ghost. He was solid. Some ghosts I've seen have been solid, but there was something very different about him. And my brother never caught him, and he always disappeared. But it was the way that it was like one of those dollies that you get in film sets. He was basically standing on it, and he would just glide straight away, very quickly, into the barn.
Now, I think before you press the next button, I was going to say, you'll have to correct my memory. Maybe I've got a false memory here, or a screen memory. But the next clip that we're going to show, I have a feeling that I found it. Yeah. The way that Brigitte described this to me, something that happened years and years and years ago, I suddenly thought, wait a minute, I've seen something a little bit like that much after, long time after the event. And I sent Brigitte the clip on YouTube. And I said, the man at the bottom of the garden dressed in black, and the strange gliding way that he moved. I said, was it anything like this? And I sent Brigitte the clip, and I think she swore at me and refused to watch it. It scared her so much. This is the clip.
This is very, very similar to him.
Can't say a word, you're gonna die, sweetie, but you won't be
gone
No,
there yet. Oh no.
I think, I have a feeling that it took Brigitte about 3 or 4 goes to watch that clip all the way through. And it, as you can see, it prompts even now an emotional reaction. And of course she told me all about this years before Buffy was created. But you know, art imitating life, life imitating art. It's just interesting when you find something like that, and when it's such a match for an experience that happened many, many years before the series was created. Now, we've reached that time, I'm afraid, in the presentation where we're going to fast forward a little bit, and you know this bit's coming, Brigitte. 1 or 2 people in the audience know, most don't. We've spoken about Brigitte being one of the most high-profile abductees, certainly in terms of researchers that she's worked with and media that she's done. But until now, this has been under the name Brigitte Grant. And in fact, I think depending on which version of the programme or the tickets you've got, there's Brigitte Grant and Brigitte Barclay. But perhaps we can now, I guess, fast forward. We've done the childhood experiences. Perhaps you can tell us what you did when you grew up.
Okay. Oh dear. Okay, excuse the title, Nick thought of it. Okay, it's quite funny really in some ways, listening to Kim beforehand, the similarities in our lives, and I've never met Kim before, and I'm sure we will definitely talk, but there's huge similarities, and I know with most abductees there usually are. Okay, my past is my past, okay, I will state that now, okay. That's 25 years ago, and I used to be a former The Sun page 3 girl. I used to do the Private calendars, American Penthouse Pet, Playboy model, and lived a fantastic life. I used to date famous people, do fantastic things, had money, had everything that I ever wanted really, but I was still having experiences, like him. And it was very hard to deal with some of those experiences on some of the jobs that I had, and not having the support of anyone to speak to. I kept a lot of this to myself. So that's what actually took me out to Los Angeles, where I had my very big close encounter. I stopped modelling, and then I was a makeup artist out there. And I wasn't Kim's makeup artist, so she's talking about what I really died, I have to say. You know, but it's like, you know, I'm sure. Anyway. So, yeah, I wanted to bridge out of the modelling, and everyone that I knew within the industry were kind of rat bags, actually. And that wasn't me, because I lived another life of realising, actually, there is so much more out there than this false world that we lived in. And even though it brought me fantastic things, like I said, beautiful places, beautiful classic cars, you know, all of the things I do kind of like, it didn't actually mean anything after I'd had an experience. So, yeah, good, that's over and done with.
Okay, well I won't ask you then about it.
No.
Okay, we've got that little revelation out of the way, but I think it is worth just pointing out that all this, you know, Brigitte dated celebrities, certainly mixed with them socially all the time, and it just does raise the interesting question, and I think it's been touched on, and I think it may be touched on in some future presentations, but we're all familiar, of course, with famous people who've seen UFOs, including John Lennon, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Muhammad Ali. We know of celebrities who are interested in UFOs, such as Robbie Williams, Peter Andre, and a number of others. And I think it is difficult for people in the public eye, whether they're in the film industry, whether they're in the glamour industry, whether they're in the music business, but it is incredibly difficult for those people in the public eye firstly to deal with these experiences when they're happening, when they already have such full-on lives. But it's certainly difficult to then talk about these things or reach out to someone who you might be able to network with. And I remember when I was writing my second book, which was about alien abductions, when I was doing a series of television interviews and things, and very often you would meet various well-known pop singers and actors in the green room before you went in and did your respective interviews. And I can absolutely tell you, I've spoken to some fairly well-known household name celebrities who have not just seen UFOs, but actually had abduction experiences, but who've said to me, and of course I'm never going to talk about that because in the current climate, that's my career over. But I know they're out there, I know their names, and one day, maybe, some of those people, and if I were to say the names, which obviously for witness confidentiality I won't, you would almost all have heard of them, I'm sure. So, celebrities and UFOs, celebrities and close encounter abduction experiences. Yes, there are some fascinating stories out there, and I hope we get to hear them. Let's fast forward to really the single biggest encounter in really a lifetime of fascinating experiences, and it's multifaceted, but really to start with, I really just ask Brigitte to tell the story and to just walk us through a very interesting series of events.
Okay. A regular day out in LA. I'd taken a girl that I knew for a job interview, and on a day of drive, and finished the job interview. On the way home, going home to the valley, I lived in the valley in Los Angeles. I then decided I had to go to Brentwood, the area of Brentwood. Never been there before in my life. Didn't know the area very well at all. I just knew that I had to go to Brentwood and to the Holiday Inn, and her house was there. I'd been speaking to the girl Kelly in the car about how her interview had gone, and I had to get to the junction of Brentwood, which is this would be LA down here. You come on an off ramp, and you've got the Holiday Inn there, big main Holiday Inn. Valley's that way, 405 and 101 freeway, major freeway. Now I'm on the off ramp here, and I've got to go over this direction to the girl's house. On my off ramp, 10 to 6 at night, beautiful daylight, really nice warm day, windows wound down in the car, chatting away to her. And then I start to feel really apprehensive and very nervous, very much like I am now. And something in my stomach, and I just, it's bigger than butterflies. And it's just building and building and building, and I just, I'm totally unaware of what it's going to be. Now, Kim said something again earlier, which was, you've got to be really careful what you wish for or what you ask for, because 2 days prior to this incident, I was with a partner that I'd had UFO experiences with before, a very, very close encounter with him. And I needed a way out of the situation. I didn't know what to do. And I put it out there. Please, make something happen. Really make something happen. And 2 days later, I had this encounter. Okay. Right, well, hang on, if I go back one more, sorry. Okay, so I'm on the off-ramp here. There's traffic lights here, and I need to go this way. You've got UCLA College going there, and like I said, you've got the Holiday Inn here. Right. I would have been kind of in that car there. Now, back then, 18 years ago, there was a wall along here, and you can see the remnants of that wall. I'm in the car here, traffic lights are here, and all of a sudden I've got this build-up in my stomach, and my hands are gripping the steering wheel really, really tight, and it's just getting tighter and tighter. I'm not sure if I'm speaking to Kelly at this stage, but all of a sudden, because my window's wound down in the car, I can hear the freeway beneath me, You know, and obviously they're going to the valley home after a day's work. You've got the Holiday Inn here again, and it's sort of starting to, the noise is starting to go, and I'm just concentrating on this feeling. And like I say, my hands are getting tighter and tighter on the steering wheel, and I look to the left, and then I see something, and I see this, you know, you've got the car windscreen, and you've got your car door. There's that little panel here that open, you know, the chrome part of the door. I just see something very quickly out of the corner of my eye, silver. And no sooner than I think it, right. No sooner than I think it, I have this structured craft right in front of me. It was above the car to the left. It was chrome. It felt so close that I could touch it, that I could just reach out and knock on it and it would be solid. It had a massive red-orange power source underneath it. It was gliding, kind of, when I say slowly but fast, it was moving but slow, but it was just in the way that it moved was very odd. And there was no, I mean, I didn't hear any noise with it. And I remember as it was above me, like 5 meters above me from the floor upwards, I'm just watching it and I'm looking and thinking, you know, where's the wings on this thing? Where's the fuelage, or, you know, whatever the technical term is, but where's the exhaust coming from it? And as it's gliding above me and it's just going over the bonnet of my car, and I'm glad that we can swear now because we couldn't last, 10 years ago. But, Kelly's next to me, and then I'm looking, I've got my nose to the windscreen, and I just go, what the fuck is that? Because I was like in awe of what this was, and it's now it's, oh dear, I told you, absolute crap. It's now in front of the car, in front of me. And, so it's obviously come from here, low, and it's glided in front of the car. And, like I say, I can't hear anything with it. My hands are gripped to the steering wheel. I feel physically sick. My eyes are watering. I can't think straight. It's a bit like one of those Filofax things. My brain is just going round and round, trying to categorise what it could be. And obviously, once I've sworn, we've both got our face to the windows and we're watching this. Let's see if this works. Oh, it does. Okay. Obviously, that's the kind of scenario anyway. And it's headed towards UCLA College. It's heading towards UCLA College. Now, I know at the traffic lights, I can't go right. Well, I'm told, strange. I'm told that I can't go right, that I have to go very high up to see this object. Now, I don't know the area at all, and it's like I'm guided at that point. I know that I have to make a right, and then I have to go down the road and make a right again, and go up beyond the Holiday Inn, up here, in another cul-de-sac. So, it's now gone over to the right of me towards the Holiday Inn, and I can still see it. I mean, it's literally, here is my last point where I really saw it. Traffic lights go back on again. I then drive over to the bridge here, and at that point, I turn around and I look out of my rear view window, and what I call, like, the back arse of it, going through the tops of the trees. It's taking, like, the tops of the trees as it's going through. and I still can see that it's got no wings. And it's just remarkable. And so I put my foot on the gas. I then drive down this road, make a right up there, and I drive up to a cul-de-sac. At this point, I'm not speaking with Kelly at all in the car. At all. And get to the top of the cul-de-sac, something like out of Dukes of Hazzard, spin it round the car. And I said, listen, we're both going to get out at the same point, and both point in the direction where we thought that we saw it. So we've driven up the road. She's obviously on this side and I'm the driver on this side. We both get out at the same time. We both then pointed that direction. And as soon as she pointed in the same direction as me, because obviously we hadn't spoken about this, you know, I felt physically sick again. My eyes were watering. I felt really drunk. Now, never drank alcohol in my life up until 10 years ago when I met my husband. But you know, from watching people get drunk, that's the kind of scenario. I was very wobbly on my feet, something didn't feel right. And I knew at that point we couldn't see the craft. The craft had totally gone. So we both got in the car, both head down the hill again, and I made a right at the bottom of the road. And maybe have a look. And I then drove to this house, which was literally, I mean, beyond here was that road that I had travelled down. Came here, drove into my friend's drive, parked the car up there, and before I parked the car up, obviously still not speaking to Kelly, I knew that it was like I was programmed that I had to go to Kelly's, I had to go to the house, but I knew that I couldn't go in. I knew that I was going to go in and have a cup of tea with her initially, we both were, but I knew that the way that I felt and what I'd witnessed, I was obviously not in my correct mind to. I remember getting out of the car and just feeling so shaky that I had to use the car to control me. God knows how I actually drove there, but I sort of was gliding my fingers along the car. I didn't want to look at anything. I didn't want to look in the sky. I didn't want to look around me. I just had my head to the ground. I didn't want anything to move. I just didn't want to, you know, look at anything. She came to the door. I gave her the money I owed her. And then I said my goodbyes. I said, I've got to go. You know, something, you know, strange has happened to me. Got back in the car and went to sit here. Now, because it's, you know, the time of day, you've got a lot of people going home. Now, actually, I don't know where that goes to. I just know that this is the area of Brentwood. And you've got a few shops up here. So at this point, I'm trying to pull my car out from there to get over here to go back along that same road. And as I there at the driveway, oh, hang on, I've done something now. Yeah. There's this gangster-like car in front of me. It's black. It's actually, the windows on it were probably half that size. They were just so thin. They were tinted. I couldn't see in it. Now, you know, I've said before, I love my classic cars. I've had many classic cars. I even work on classic cars because I, you know, appreciate them and have restored cars myself. So, you know, when I had this car in front of me, I'm thinking, you know, again, what the fuck are you doing there? You know, it's because after what I've just seen, well, obviously I knew that there's classic cars all over Los Angeles, working on film sets, but this was just a little bit too odd yet again. It didn't fit right into how my day should have gone. Because I couldn't see in it, and I was like then told in my head, it's been put there for you to remember, for you to never forget. Now, well, obviously I'm not going to forget the LA, you know, my big craft, but why this? And visually, it's like I had eyes in front of me, and it was placed there for me to never forget and for me to do things differently. Okay, so I thought, okay, and I mean, you know, that's those words, like, you know, like most experiences here, go on and on throughout the years. You know, you keep trying to mull over it, but actually I do kind of get it, you know what we're really trying to do. So, it wasn't a typical day at that point. So, the car moved off in the traffic. I then moved into the traffic line, and I was back in the same vicinity where I saw the craft, and going down the off-ramp on the opposite side, and because my windows were still wound down, and me and Kelly not speaking in the car still, I then heard this like really roaring noise. And I then looked again, as I'm actually on the freeway, as I'm just coming down the off-ramp. I then looked again, and then I saw 4, 5 unmarked military helicopters heading towards UCLA College, where I'd seen this craft. And you know, I'm like, still not speaking to Kelly. Drove home to my apartment. My partner was there at the time. Put my bags down. Kelly walked into the restroom to go to the toilet, and I just remember catching a glimpse of her in the restroom, you know, mirror, and you know, she looking at me looking at her, and those words that were exchanged just by looking at each other were like, you know, I'm going to swear again, but you know, something's really, really, really gone on. And 2 days after my Los Angeles encounter, I packed my bags and left. I don't know where Kelly is. And in our previous talk, her name was always Jane. And because that's what I thought her name was. And it wasn't until my ex-boyfriend, who I'd actually had a UFO experience with anyway, and I lived with in this apartment, he totally forgot that actually her real name was Kelly. And it's like, whether it be like a screen memory for him, I don't know, but it's like, I would love, obviously, for her to come forward, so that's why I put it out there now that her name is Kelly. She's a hairdresser out, you know, wherever. I would love it, and I know everyone has a different path in this. Some people don't want to talk about their encounters, but this was such a remarkable encounter. I would love for her to come forward to actually say that, you know, she was with me, but she hasn't as of yet. And that would have been like the sort of scenario that would have been seen. Now, you know, people were at the Holiday Inn. I don't think it's the Holiday Inn anymore. I've been told recently it's been changed, but you know, it was a restaurant on the top of the Holiday Inn. So at that time of night, people would have been eating after staying there or getting ready to go out in Los Angeles, go to the Rose Bowl Theatre to watch something. So, you know, people say, you know, why you? Well, I'm really hoping that someone else would come forward that had seen something that was packed on the freeway. You know, the Holiday Inn must have been packed with people. So this is, I've done this picture because I think it's the same similar craft. Okay, that's a different, you know, helicopter, but that's what it was. You know, these helicopters, you know, were going very fast to intercept, you know, this craft, low-flying, you know, craft.
I think, I mean, it's an absolutely fascinating encounter. I mean, there are elements, I think, of all sorts of different stories that we've all heard in there. And again, just to me, the narrative richness of this whole string of experiences seems to have elements of up-close and personal UFO sighting. And by the way, that animation is a close approximation done by a friend of yours to illustrate, firstly, what this thing looked like, but secondly, the critical point, this wasn't some, you know, vague light or shape in the sky. This really was close. And that raises some interesting questions. We've got this string of experiences, the sighting itself, the strange unmarked car, and Brigitte, knowing her classic cars, but this is just unlike anything that she's ever seen or is familiar with. The unmarked black helicopters, the question, were they chasing it, were they escorting it even? There are all sorts of issues. One can look at classic cases like the Cash Landrum sighting, and of course there's an example of a UFO seen at very close range. There's an example, obviously, of a large number of military helicopters apparently escorting this thing. Those of you not familiar with the case, I mean, involved what tragically seems to be a death as a direct result of a UFO encounter, and the feeling that there was radiation coming from the underside of this craft. And again, you know, the disturbing possibility that one of the things that made you so giddy and disorientated was even a mild dose of radiation, exposure to an electromagnetic field. Again, I think there are all sorts of possibilities thrown up by this series of events. But I mean, like any events, sorry,
No.
no? like any series of events, again, I said earlier, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it just, I think, seemed to both of us that it was almost like there was a bit of the story missing. And particularly, I mean, I can't speak for the work that Brigitte did with Dolores Cannon, not really with John Mack either, but I actually accompanied Brigitte for a 5-day trip to New York a while ago. And Brigitte's aim was to spend a number of days with Budd Hopkins, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, the abduction researcher. Again, the book and the TV miniseries Kim showed in her presentation. And during the course of Brigitte's stay with Budd and sessions that they did on all of these encounters that we've discussed today, obviously, both consciously and with the use of regression hypnosis, more pieces of the puzzle emerged. And perhaps I can take you back to, I guess, where there seemed to be this disconnect, the gripping of the steering wheel.
Okay. Okay. I'm at the car. I'm in the car. My hands on the steering wheel, gripped very, very tightly. Obviously, still not speaking to Jane. I just knew that there was something building and building and building. Now, it wasn't before I saw the craft. All of a sudden, it's a bit like when people have got low blood pressure. They start to, the lights start to dim, and you hear buzzing or tones, and I just started to black out. And even though I've still got my hands on the steering wheel, I feel like I'm being pulled apart. I'm being sucked out of the car. And it's like, the way I can only describe it, it's like every atom of my body is then going through the wheel, the dashboard, and then from the dashboard through the engine, and then through the engine, and then up, all in fragments. And then, all of a sudden, I'm somewhere else. Now, I don't really recall being on board a craft, ever, with any of my experiences. But what I do get with my experiences is when I have had abductions, and I have beings next to me, I'm always put in a place that obviously they know that I feel familiar with, which is in a field. Now, after I'm pulled out of the car, I've got beings, 3 beings in front of me. And the feeling that I have from them is just total love, beyond anything. And it's like I can feel every part of them and like see the auras around them, but there's that aura that's going around all of us that's, you know, connecting me and these beings. and one of the beings has a baby. Now, I know that the baby wasn't mine, and I was, pretty adamant by that. But what I'm adamant, totally in, with all of my experiences that I've had, it has always been about the beings. Even like the man at the bottom of the garden, the bond that I had with that, and I knew that he was there. These beings were, in our last talk, I had done a drawing and I wasn't able to find it again to put it on this one. But they were tall, they were like transparent, I could see their flesh, they had blue veins, they had pink veins, they had hair, they had blonde hair, but it was like a hair transplant. Now, being an ex-makeup artist, I studied them when they were in front of me. I'm looking at every part of them, and it was, I can only describe it like a hair transplant. It was just, this piece is missing, and it was long. And it's not that they wanted to present me with that baby, it was about them. And obviously it was very emotional seeing this. And Budd asked lots of things of me at the time and stuff, but I will stick to my guns. It was never about the baby. I haven't had, the same experiences as Kim Carlsberg, but for me, it's the beings and the craft I get right in front of me, so I'm not a good person to date either, as well. So definitely not. Yeah. So, okay. These are just a few pictures that I like because they feel very much a part of me. Obviously, this wasn't the time that I was there. I actually went in '89, but it's just showing, downtown Los Angeles, whether it's a fake or not, doesn't matter. Seed's been planted, someone's seen it, and think, this could happen. Well, it does happen, and I just like that picture, really. This picture is just away from where Kim Carlsberg was living at the time, and that's very much the same craft that I've seen. Now, Preston Dennett did a book on UFOs over Topanga Canyon, and we weren't really going to talk about this bit in the story, but I used to live in a place called Topanga Canyon, and I didn't realise that it was a UFO hotspot, and I had quite a few experiences there. And there's a really good picture, I couldn't find that yet again, of a similar craft to that, but with a big red-orange power source underneath it. And it was photographed at Topanga Canyon about the same time when I was living there. And then this is what you might see if you go to the store. This is what I do see when I go to the store, but so that is in Santa Monica again, at the edge, the other side of Topanga Canyon, and I don't know who it came from, but that's the same type of craft yet again. And then, not that one. Right, there you go.
Well, it's an absolutely fascinating encounter, and I think we're now sort of running fairly short of time. So, really by way of conclusion, I guess I'd just like to ask you if there's really anything else that you want to pick out. And I suppose the other question of, why speak out now, and what you're hoping for?
Okay. For other people to go public. I am actually really a regular type of person, even though with, the past that I've led, and I've witnessed some extraordinary things, whether it be from the military or I haven't, also I've had a lot of interference with military helicopters right outside, as close as like 3 rows away. And they are right in front of me, and they're not moving, and they're looking at me. So I've had about 7 of those. I I think it goes back to Steve Bassett and his talk later on today, you know, Richard Dolan's. You know, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to bring people, you know, make people come forward, whether they be more pilots, more naval officers, you know, more people from the media. Just make it, you know, if we all do a part of our job, then we've done what we've needed to do, really. You know, just here to tell another story.
Well, I think you've told it extraordinarily well, and we're going to take a few questions, but if time permits. But I think really with that said, I would like to say this hasn't been about me. I've just been a facilitator, but I mean really I don't think I've been needed. I mean you've just done the most extraordinary job of telling it from the heart. So thank you very much, Brigitte.
Just before, we should have time for a couple of questions anyway, but just before we do so, I'd just like to take a vote of thanks to Brigitte. It's probably my Scottish accent.
Sounds gorgeous.
Just before that, I'll call it Bridget and all that. Just a few points I'd like to make down, especially for you, Brigitte. One of them was that calling you Brigitte, as opposed to Brigitte. I also had Nick doing that earlier, so it's not so bad. It was lovely to see your nerves replaced by an honest and articulate presentation. I'm sure everybody in the audience noticed this. Brigitte was so nervous coming here and she maintained it. But I think it's wonderful to see this because it often is an indication of a truly honest report of an experience. What we make of that experience is up to you. But the honesty was so apparent in your presentation. Well done. I would practice with a paint a bit. You know, going up the wall and everything is not a good way. Once again, we got this crossover again with psychic experiences and the science and the ufology. I often wonder if there is a connection here between what people see and report as a paranormal experience, which I've been involved with a long time myself, and what's actually interdimensionals, ufology. Excuse me, whatever. And another one, be very careful what you wish for. You might just get it, you know. And if you do get it, you better be capable of handling it. I think I did pick up, and it was quite funny because of Richard's talk the other night about the 9/11 phenomena. The building where you paid the cash, his number was 11747, which in numerological terms is 9/11.
Okay. I will tell you something else then, in coincidence to that encounter. I still have close encounters. My last close encounter was, well, it's now 3 weeks ago. And I sound like some out of AA, don't I? It's 3 weeks ago, and before that it was, before that it was a week before again. Now, last year I had an encounter very early in the morning. I was working the night shift, and I was reading, can I say this? Have we got time?
Sure, good, yeah.
I was working the night shift at an all-boys school, reading a fantastic book on remote viewing, and I just looked out of the window and I saw some geese, and I wished them well on their way to wherever they were going. Put my head back down in the book, and then no sooner had I done that, I then had to look again, and I saw 7 or 8 round, large balls over the other side of the water, very large, on top of, very intelligently, following the lines of the trees. And because I had radio linked with other staff, I then quickly called up another member of staff. They came up, I was thinking it was a guy that actually always wanted to see something. So I said, you're the first person, if I ever do, you're here. But my boss came up, and of course I'm like head out the window watching this, and it's my boss, and I'm like rolling my eyes. And he said, what are they? I said, I don't know. I said, I've just been watching them from there, and now they're there. Anyway, the significant part of it that goes back to the number of 9/11 is That day, I then went home, went to sleep during the day, woke up to be told that Corey Haim had died from Lost Boys. And I'm like, you know, I love that film, you know, I absolutely love it. And went on, Googled that he died in the Woodland Hills. Now, I'm thinking, oh, I used to live in the Woodland Hills. And I Googled again, and he died in Oakwood Apartments. Now, Oakwood Apartments is the apartment that I drove back to after I'd had my Los Angeles encounter. So that is really quite significant. Yeah, again, the synchronicities behind that, but that's quite bizarre to me. Yeah.
Well, I must also congratulate you now, once more, Brigitte, because you've become a professional speaker. Because you're getting in here, really. Just to wrap up, folks, once again, we've seen this cross-reference I was talking about to you all earlier of independently people verifying certain elements like the black helicopter and so forth. And one thing that I would say, I've had many UFO experiences myself, Brigitte. I've never reported one. We were talking the other day, I'm not sure, you probably know more facts about this than I do, Nick. I'm not sure, I mean, just for interesting, how many people in here have actually had a UFO or paranormal experience? Stick your hands up, please. I would say that's well over 2/3, Nick. Would you hear that? There's probably more, but we'll always like to err on the way we say. So when I think of that, 2/3 of you have had this. I do believe there's a link between the paranormal and the physical sighting of craft. How many of you now, put up your hands, how many of you have reported? So you see what I'm getting at? Yeah, but you see what I'm getting at. So I would say that's probably works out as something like 1 in 1,000 or perhaps more. Actually, take that report back. So you're definitely not alone. I would like you all to put your hands together and give a real big extra politics 20 of them. Thank you.